session of Trendspotting, Why Things Matter, a monthly lecture series that connects the frontiers of academia, research, and thought with issues that matter to people's lives. This is our third session with the Hearth Advisors, a collaborator that we are very happy to have because they bring us a diverse panel every month, and they bring us conversations that are intricate, that are nuanced, that are comprehensive. Our first session was on EdTech and technology. The second one was on the blind side of academia, women in sciences. The third one is equally interesting, if not more. It's diversifying paths to financial inclusion, which hopes to unravel the pathways towards economic empowerment for all. May I please invite our moderator and the managing director of Hearth Advisors, Shashank Veera, to introduce our panelists and take this evening forward. Thank you.
Okay, good evening, everyone. Thank you for being here. And without much ado, as we normally do, I'd like to get going with basically just introducing our panel very quickly and giving an idea of how we're going to take today's session. Now, if you have your mobile phones on loud, please turn them to silent at this moment so that we don't disturb the flow of the discussion. Now, our panelist today at the extreme right is Dr. Rajat Kathuria. He's an economist, and he's currently Dean of the Department of Humanities and Social Sciences at Shiv Nadar University. He's done a lot of work in this area over his career, and he's going to be sharing some of his experiences during this evening's discussion. To my immediately right is Shobhini Mukherjee. She's the Executive Director and the head for JPAL in South Asia. And JPAL, of course, needs no introduction. What Shobhini brings to the table, aside from JPAL's deep focus on evidence, right, is also something that's close to my heart, is that she began her career in education, right, rather than in looking at ways to alleviate poverty and find solutions to alleviate global poverty. Immediately on my left is Smita Mankad. So Smita Mankad has done, the most interesting part of her career has been the grassroots work she's done with micro-entrepreneurs in the artisans sector and the craft sector. And I'm again hoping that some of the experiences that she had at that time can be brought to this discussion. And on my extreme left is Ajay Srivastav, who is an equities person, and he brings a really, really interesting perspective. He's been with Citibank. He runs an equity consulting group himself, very successful in taking small investments and really large investments and growing money. And that's a very interesting perspective that we'd like to bring into today's discussion. Now, what is today's discussion about? It's about financial inclusion. Financial inclusion means different things to different people, and it's often conflated with the tools of financial inclusion. In today's discussion, we are going to look beyond those tools, right? We might talk about some of the tools, but we're going to look at the outcomes a little bit more. So I'd like to begin the conversation with you, Shobhini, right? And to actually look at what is the evidence that you all have seen, right, of does financial inclusion actually lead to the outcomes that it was intended for? That is it making a difference to having greater equality of women? Is it actually leading people out of poverty? What does the evidence say?
Thank you for having me. Thank you for having me here, Shashank. It's a pleasure to be here and discussing.
Yes, of course. Can we have a higher volume, please? Yeah, thank you.
Thank you for having me here. I hope you can all hear me clearly. It's a leading question, Shashank, and a very interesting one. One would imagine that if you lend to somebody, they will make good with that capital. Between 2005 and 2010, there were a series of randomized evaluations done, which actually looked at what we thought microfinance was a transformative boom. It didn't work. Now, it wasn't transformative in the way we imagined it would be. It did not create entrepreneurs. It did not expand businesses in the way we thought that they would. And it's a very interesting phenomenon because, if you can look at microfinance and the way, it's for as a means to an end in itself. But if you're looking at financial inclusion, if you're looking at alleviating poverty, if you're looking at how do you give a step up to the communities and to the borrowers who are using that capital, either to, a tailor buys a sewing machine, so you move from hand sewing to a machine, agriculture, it did not have the impact that we hoped it would. Now, why did it not have that impact? There are a bunch of reasons. So if you look at, we didn't see increase in consumption, we did not see increase in expansion of businesses, and we didn't see any socioeconomic gains either. So we saw increased investments, we didn't see the outcomes. And then you can have tools and processes, but you need to look at the outcomes as well. You can, outputs would be increase in investments, but we didn't see the outcomes in expansion of business. There are two sides to this. Now, when you look at the borrower, traditional microfinance and traditional, what they say financial inclusion models have very stringent repayment, conditions. They have the flexibility in borrowing is also not there. Very high interest rates. A lot of we have even seen that loan agents can be a deterrent in all of this, and it's a very interesting. I'll talk about it a little bit later. But loan agents themselves are a deterrent. The incentives are not compatible with the borrower's incentives. So on the borrower side, there are many of these factors that come into play. And on the lender's side, it's not a trust-based market. So the lender doesn't really trust the borrower to repay on time, which is why you have all of these stringent constraints. What we've seen is in an information scarce environment, you will have a lot of punitive measures. You will have a lot of higher, constraints in terms of the way you want to put these financial products. So therefore, we saw that a lot of these businesses, because they were not being able to make profit, the reinvestments were not happening. We did see a few spillover effects. So there are two interesting things that we saw. We saw that, and these are more than 35 studies actually across the world, across 10, 11 countries across the world that we've done this in low and middle income countries. And we saw that there was some spillover effects on, say, casual wages. So you were seeing that at the employee level, but not at the borrower level. We did see, we saw in some situations that as you were, at least for those who were already profitable or those who were already entrepreneurs, they actually did a little bit better based upon the loans that they were getting. But so it does not drive financial inclusion in the way that we hoped it would. But those who were at the bottom of the pyramid, it was not transformative for them. At the most, a lukewarm response because they weren't able to make good with that.
And so if I get you correctly, Shubhni, what you're really saying is the evidence says that those who are on the edge of almost being self-sufficient are being tipped over, and this little bit of finance is enough to get them to be surplus generators. But those who are at the bottom of the pyramid are not being able to pull themselves out of that cycle.
Absolutely right. And what we saw, the investments were mostly in capital goods. They were in short to immediate term sort of getting over that financial hurdle, rather than investing in a business for the future, because it did not make any entrepreneurs of that segment.
I'd like to bring you in, Rajat, on this. And I know you have done a lot of work on the way digital finance and digital tools are actually helping this process. Do you think it's an issue of instrument, right? Or do you think it is something which is structural to the very nature in which microfinance and microcredit have worked?
Thanks, Shashank. At the outset, pleasure to be here. Thanks for having me. try and address your question by sort of referring to what Shobhini said and sort of bringing in a favorite topic of mine these days, which is talking about markets. Because digital sort of instruments impact markets in sort of ways that we had not anticipated. So I'm going to throw out a little bit of jargon, but try and keep it as less as possible. I mean, the is made about microfinance. If you look at microfinance as an instrument, it was thought of exactly what you're saying. It was thought that it would address the problem of financial inclusion, create entrepreneurs, and people would be able to then invest that and generate surpluses and reinvest them and grow businesses. That, of course, didn't happen. And there's a whole history of microfinance in India that suggests that there was immense amount of pervasive market failure. As I said, this is a favorite topic of mine. I don't think markets work anywhere in the world. And increasingly, they are beginning to fail in the countries that have sort of exalted markets and also sort of asked other countries or recommended to other countries to use as much of the market as possible, which is fine. But I think markets will never work. And microfinance is an example of where markets have failed, even after the huge investments. In fact, I think the huge investments that came in were a manifestation of the market failure. I don't know how many of you in the room recall the fact that when microfinance was thrown open to private markets, there were scandals in India. People were investing in microfinance institutions and walking away with huge amounts of profit, and in fact selling companies and walking away with huge amounts of profits. Of course, it created a moral dilemma. You're creating money on the back of people who are actually steeped in poverty. And interest rates of 1,000% plus, 1,000% per annum, because you borrowed 100 rupees in the morning and you had to pay 120 in the evening, and microfinance institutions would have you believe that we are doing good because we're lending to people who don't have money and charging 120, which is 20 rupees a day at the end of the day, and if you calculate on a per annum basis, it would obviously be huge amounts of money. And microfinance, and which there were several other stories that happened. RBI then created a committee called the Maligaon Committee and decided that they were going to cap the interest rates at 26% plus.
Yeah.
And now, of course, it's capped at the margins. The margins are capped, but at that time it was 26%. But what's the moral of the story? Let's cut to the chase. What do I think? I'm not certainly sort of providing a macro view of microfinance, but of course microfinance has done great things in Bangladesh and Brazil and Latin America. But we should not assume, and I'll now sort of move to digital, microfinance at that time was viewed as a panacea for all of India's troubles, 2012. And here is an instrument that will take us out of poverty, that will deliver us from this evil. And it didn't do. You were putting too much on the back of microfinance, just like we are doing today on digitalization. Just like we feel Digital India will be able to cure us of all our problems, including poverty and financial inclusion. And as I said, it will not. Neither will digital, nor did microfinance. There are a lot of other things that need to be done in concert. Literacy, and I'm happy to talk about it later. There are so many other things that need to be done. But microfinance by itself cannot and should not be looked at upon an instrument of addressing financial inclusion, because as Shobhini said, it was more often than not, 10,000 rupees, 20,000 rupees, with the kind of self-regulations and over-regulation that Shobhini spoke about that existed in the sector. It was used for consumption smoothing, more often than not. Consumption smoothing, or it could be used for borrowing for marriages. People get into huge amounts of debt when they have marriages in their families. People get into huge amounts of debt when there's a health shock. and you get into poverty. So that was what microfinance was doing. It wasn't creating entrepreneurs, because creating entrepreneurs in the system not only requires credit, but also requires other sort of complementary skills which need to be developed. And just like for digital, you're not going to say that I give access to a mobile phone and all your problems are solved. I'm giving you access to Aadhaar and a bank account and all your problems are solved. No, it will solve some of the problems, but I think the complementary skills that we need to impart to the population that is less educated, low skilled, is not simply giving access to credit, is not simply going to get you out of poverty. So I think that's the sort of my initial take, that no one instrument in India, even growth, as we said, so Shobni referred to the period 2005 to 2010, the golden years of growth of India's economy were sometime during 2004, 2009, we grew at, on average in real terms, about 9%. And that was the time when about 137 million Indians were lifted out of poverty. So growth had a bigger impact on poverty, or its sort of brethren, you would say financial inclusion, than these other policy instruments. But I'm not for a moment saying that growth, in terms of that Bhagwati and Sen debate that you saw a few years ago, growth is necessary, but it's not sufficient. And I think financial instruments are necessary, but not sufficient, to address the problem I've
Yeah. So Rajat, I'm going to pick from one of the things you said and weave it into one of the assumptions behind financial inclusion and instruments of financial inclusion, which is that if, let's say in an ideal world, we had access to finance, we had entrepreneurship, we had go-to-market strategies, we had a support system that allowed productization to go to market, right? There would be a golden age that would come, because you would pull people away from subsistence into surplus growth, right? Okay. Now,
So,
go ahead. Yeah.
Your sort of little, sort of this
Hypothetical example, yeah, yeah.
that you've created reminds me of something about data on unemployment or employment in India. I just want to refer to this. It connects very well with what you just sort of hypothesized, which is that in India the unemployment rates are pretty low. And although they disguise a number of things that the data doesn't show. I mean, an unemployment rate of even 4%, 5%, 6% doesn't tell you about the amount of unemployment or disguised unemployment that exists in the country, or underemployment. But why is the unemployment rate in India so low? And the reason the unemployment rate in India is so low is because poverty is high. People cannot afford to be unemployed, and therefore they will do anything to be employed. So connecting with what you just said, I think the entrepreneurial ability of Indians is perhaps unsurpassed. Whether they are educated or not, the sort of need for survival makes them, so necessity is the mother of invention, right?
Yeah.
So the need for survival, say agriculture, in small businesses in rural areas, there are lots of entrepreneurs that emerge because they need to survive.
Yeah, actually, I'm going to take that to Smitha, because that hypothetical example that I took, Smitha actually tried out, right, on it. And Smitha, you know what I'm referring to, the weavers. And so Smitha, actually worked with weavers and worked with microfinance and created a go-to-market strategy, right, backed with a big brand like Fab India, right, to try and see that can you actually use a full supply chain going to market, right, and bring in micro-entrepreneurship and pull people out of poverty, right, on it. And the experiences were mixed, right? What did you actually see?
Thank you. Thanks, Shashank. It was, I have to say, so compared to, I'm a practitioner. Let me just preface everything I'm saying here as something that, we've done on the ground. And I think that was by far the most interesting phase, not just of my career and work life, but I think really in the company, So let me take you back to a time we're talking starting 2007, 2008, running up to about, all the way up to, I would say, 2013, 2015, 2013. And that was a period of not just, it started as an experiment. It started actually a couple of decades before it took the shape that it did, because there were a number of experiments in terms of ownership. And I think the premise was that let's take this relationship with artisans and our producers to beyond this transactional sort of buy-sell. You know, you give an order, they make products. Yes, it's your design, and you market it. But let's take this beyond that to ownership and sharing of profits, sharing of the wealth that is created. And that's the time actually this phrase inclusive capitalism not just got coined, but was put into practice. So the model at that time was that Fab India's supply chain, we structured it into what we call community-owned companies. And there were 18 regional companies around the country. And the artisans and craftspeople of that region worked directly with the company. So there was an office on the ground, there was a warehouse, there was a team, and the head of that company sort of reported into me at head office. Now, these 18 companies were on the ground. They were close to the artisans and craftspeople. So in terms of even finding product people who otherwise would not have made it to Delhi, leave alone head office and find the right people and, show your product. So being close to the ground changed a lot of things. Offering them shares in these companies. So these were companies that were separate legal entities. They were unlisted, but they were, we brought in artisans as shareholders. Now that changed the relationship hugely, the level of commitment, the level of pride, the level of ownership in terms of sending in product on time, sending in the right quality, all these things changed. And depending on the profits that the company made, they got a share of the profits depending on, how many shares they held. And that journey from a time where in the first year we were going door to door, talking about, we're starting this thing, this is an idea, would you buy a share? So from them not knowing what a share meant, and when they saw the share certificate, they didn't know. This is before DMAT, another point on digitalization. So very often I think, many of the things we try to do are a little bit ahead of the time. Opening bank accounts for them was near impossible. I mean, there was no Jandan accounts. There was zero balance accounts technically on paper, but no bank wanted to open them. And in one bank, I found one manager who took a leap of faith and said, okay, we'll partner. And they would come with us to every location and help us open these accounts and DMAT accounts for these for the artisans. So going from a time where they would say, what is a share? Why should we buy this? 2 years into it, they're saying, and we used to do these AGMs and in the village, and all these people would come, and they're saying, why are you only giving us 15% dividend this year? This should be 20% dividend. We've looked at your balance sheet, right? So the adoption and going back to how quickly people understood the concept, valued it, and were willing to embrace it, surprised us. And it was fantastic, So that learning curve was incredibly valuable for so many reasons. And that, in terms of financial inclusion, I think that ownership did a lot more than giving out, micro loans or microfinance in any way, because you're working with producers who have a business And it was supported by, say, advances for orders that were given out and, getting paid on time. So all these things help with that, where you're making sure that they have all that they need to do business and do business successfully, So this was one of the experiments. It ran successfully for many years till we had to go back to the drawing board because of some changes in government policy, which necessitated a change. The other example, really in terms of practice, that I want to bring to the table is I've been associated with a foundation called the Women on Wings Foundation, which is an Indo-Dutch collaboration. It's 16 years old now. And we started doing some work together when I was at Fab India, and I sit on the board now in the last few years. But what Women on Wings does, and the mission there is to co-create 1 million jobs for women in rural India. So very specific mandate, and go about it very systematically. What we have seen there, the experience there in 16 years has been that if you give a job to a woman in a rural area, that family can come out of poverty in 1 generation. And we've seen this time after time after time. Because the women, when they are earning, it not just changes their position in their family and their community as the breadwinner. And there is a period of strife and conflict. It's not easy when that transition happens because there's resistance from the men when the women start earning first, and when they start earning more than then, it creates its own challenges. But these women put back into the business or whatever they're doing. Most of them are artisans and craftspeople, so they are doing embroidery, or they're doing tailoring, or they're doing weaving, and they invest in their families so their children go to school, they get better nutrition. And that education, nutrition, and seeing their mothers work changes the dynamic for the children. And that is absolutely, the reality, time after time after time, village after village. And we're at close to, 350,000 jobs and going strong. It works, so that's another way to look at. So there's also the question of scale, right? Here we're talking about one woman in one village, and what difference can it make if you give her the job and the option of earning a livelihood. And then we're talking about community-owned companies, where we had, across 18 companies, we had about 23,000 artisan shareholders. And full spectrum. It could be a master craftsman with 10, 15, 20 looms. It could be a non-profit, it could be a large enterprise. So there were all sizes of enterprises who were welcomed as shareholders. So that is somewhere where you can do this at scale, But I think, and that is the fine-tuning that needs to be done for financial inclusion, is to really look at, are you addressing the individual? Are you addressing a community? Are you addressing an enterprise, And there is probably a different level of this, different mix of the same ingredients that you bring to the table for them to make it successful,
So I'm gonna take it on from there, Smita, to bring in Ajay. Ultimately, it's all boiling down to the numbers, right, on it. And Ajay is a financial numbers person. And Ajay, I'm gonna, bring you in to talk about, Rajat talked about the 26% cap that was put in on microfinance, and I remember those days with Basics in Andhra Pradesh and various others, and the stuff that was done at that time. And just let's look around and think about the last few loans that we know about, right, in our lives. What rate did we get them at? 8, 9, 10%? If we were unlucky, we got them at 10%, right, on it. If you're a large, many thousand crore company, you're probably getting it at 5, 6, 7%, just above the cost of capital, right, on it. And as you go lower down in the pyramid, you're getting it at a higher and higher interest rate, right? And your cost of capital for a micro entrepreneur is massive. So if that's the reality, and I'm oversimplifying simplifying it, of course, if that's the reality that the people who need it the most are getting at the highest cost, right? Then when you start making your surpluses, you want to generate the maximum return on your money that you can, because you've paid a very high cost for that capital, right? Now, Ajay, that's a conversation you and I have had,
Yes.
right? And I want to
Yes.
bring you in on it, and you say it rather than my saying it, right? About your belief on that.
First of all, for disclosure, I own stakes in microfinance companies. I'm not an academic. And I can tell you, contrary to what you heard, the stories are fantastic. You know, there is no interest rate. And I'll tell you what happens really on the ground. You have a Golgappe wala who walks around the streets, right? He doesn't have money to buy his raw materials. So he comes to us and says, give me just 1,000 rupees. Okay? He takes 1,000 rupees, buys the ingredients, goes and sells in the market, and he makes a 1,000 rupees on top of that. Out of that, he gives me 200 rupees. Absolutely usurious rates of interest, supposed to be, on 200 rupees or 1,000. But look at the guy. Nobody going to give him 1,000 rupees. He earned 800 rupees at the end of the day. So, you know, the way you visualize it, you can take the data, statistics, turn it around and says 200 on 1,000 in one day is crazy. But for the guy, he earned 800 because I gave him 1,000. And that's why today, ladies and gentlemen, the microfinance industry is creating so much employment in this country. It's unbelievable. You have to see the stories in villages, stories in shopkeepers, stories of hawkers, stories everywhere. That is true financial inclusion, and that's happened because we are digitized today. I can take the money, Google Pay, he Google Pays, and we're done with it. And I can tell you one thing again. I travel around. We have the best payment infrastructure system in the world today. In the world. And that's amazing story of India. You know, we can say, will it solve all our problems? Perhaps not. But if it was not there today, can you imagine what to do today? You pay to your sabzi wala with Google Pay, right? He uses his Google Pay to pay his loan. It's all happening online. And you know, so yes, you can say we earn a lot of money, we charge the guy interest, but he's not going to get money from anybody else, okay? And therefore, so many people depend on it. You go to the Amazon websites, you know how many suppliers today get money from us today? There are thousands and lakhs of suppliers who get money purely saying your last month billing was 40,000, you get a loan of 30,000, you go buy your material, and we adjust from what he gets paid to Amazon. You know, yes, it is taking time. India is a large country, poverty is huge, but you divide this country by north and south, and you see what's happening in the south and north. North is lagging behind for various reasons, partly political, partly whatever it is. South story is a great success story out there. I was talking to Ratna in the car and I'm telling him, you travel around Kerala, you don't see poor people there. You don't see poor hundis there. So at the end of the day, you can blame financial institution, the rate of interest, whatever it is. Firstly, it's giving a living, a life to people. Believe me, thousands of people are getting their livelihoods today, and lots of them are women. You know, talking of Fab India and suppliers and handlooms and handicrafts, you see how many people have come on to online, and the only reason they can survive there is because they have access to microfinance. So yes, you can blame interest rate, but that's what has happened. India's financial inclusion story could have been a lot better, and I can tell you what ails us today when you go to the field. Two things ail in India. The Indian philosophy of fatalism says कि what is my status in life is because मैंने बुरे कर्म किए होंगे, तो इस जन्म में तो मेरे को कुछ नहीं मिलने वाला. Okay? If I can get out of that mindset, people, they can do a lot better. When you want to make people generate wealth, बुरे कर्म किए होंगे, हमने किया होगा. That is one. Second Indian philosophy which you see all over the place, for whatever reason it is, money is not good. Okay? Why is it not good? Money can't buy you happiness. Sure, it can't buy you happiness, but believe me, happiness is, there's no happiness without money. All right? These two cultural philosophies that I see everywhere today is rampant across at least of the lower strata of society. They believe in, you know, we all believe in God, but they believe in evil, they believe in all the stuff. So when you tell them, whatever you make, why don't you start to invest in equities? Why don't you do something to your life that makes you a better return? The answer is he just looks at you and says, bank mein jama kar diya. Not many people realize that in Indian banks, we got 40 lakh crores lying in saving bank accounts, which earn you next to nothing compared to this thing. 40 lakh crore. And who's comprising 40 lakh crore? Is the bottom segment of the population who's got 1,000, 5,000, 10,000, and they actually make negative rates of return because inflation is higher. So what do you do with them? So I think, the story of financial inclusion in India would start from by convincing people you can make a difference to your lives by your actions. And by your actions means do something about your financial, if you're a surplus. I keep telling my own help in the house that we give you Diwali bonus. Why don't you let me buy shares for you, right? And he survives on a family which works on equity, both me and my wife, right? But he's nahi, theek hai, bank mein jama kar denge FD mein. So the struggle of financial inclusion of India is going to be legitimizing that giving credit to people to earn their livelihood is a legitimate activity. What people make, the risk you run, when COVID shut down suddenly, right? Everybody got shut down. Money was not coming in. What happens to people like us who've lent money to the market? We had to ride the storm for 2 years. That is why you get those kind of rate of returns, because when the bad time comes, it is a buffer for it. But for the man, the Golgappe wala, if I stop giving him 1,000 rupees, where does he go for the money? And I think the story is again and again that we need to have faith in our system, growth, economy, equity. Without equity, you are losing wealth year on year because your bank fixed deposit, your bank interest you're fighting against inflation. Inflation is 8% in India. Your bank interest on savings is 2 to 3% net. It's on the lowest balance for the month, so you get very little money. So, Shashank, so the model is somehow or the other, we need to get people to come on the bandwagon to say, you need to have comfort money in the bank. Fine, have it. That's important, very important. But more than that, you cannot create wealth and future for yourself if you don't get onto the equity market. Equity markets will not give you return consistently, but over a period of a life of a child, if you start investing, whatever he gets in Diwali, whatever he gets in Holi, put some little money. And again, thanks to digitization, you can put 100 rupees in a mutual fund. You can buy stocks for even 10 rupees. If digitization was not there, nothing would have been possible. So I think I come from a stream a little different, maybe perhaps some panel members to say, I think poor countries' stories will be written on being able to be digital, to be able to get credit, to be able to get equity investments to people and make them generate wealth, which is far higher than the inflation rate. Otherwise, they will become poorer because they earn 100 rupees, but when they took the FD out, that 100 rupees is not going to give them 100 rupees of purchasing power. So you're becoming actually poorer at the end of the day if you stick to bank financing.
So if I may come in here,
Yeah.
if you don't
Go
mind.
ahead.
So I think as economists, we need to up our game. We need to tell better stories. Many good stories have been told of the Golgappa wala. But if you put all of the Golgappa walas into, and I'm hoping you will back me on this, Rajat. If you put many Golgappa walas in many different studies, and these are randomized evaluations, and I glossed over the word, but let me repeat what I mean by randomized evaluations. We look at causality. As economists, we want to know what works, what doesn't, and we want to be very sure about why something works or it doesn't work. And I can tell you, we've done dozens and dozens of randomized evaluations, randomized control trials, which is controlled in treatment groups, where in medicine, so we both have a headache, but he gets the Crocin and I don't, and you want to see whether that pill works or not. And in the development sector, that's the most causal way of estimating impact. And putting many Golgappa walas together, we have seen that it is not making better livelihoods for people. It might make a better livelihood for that one Golgappa wala, but it is not going to do it for a whole range of people who are in that poverty net or in that stream. And I do want to, I'll tell you 2-3 different stories, and I want to weave together what Smita just said as well about women's entrepreneurship and women also being able to ride on this digital financial wave. Firstly, the female labor force participation is declining in India. It was about, I could get these numbers wrong, but it was about 32% in a couple of years back, and post-COVID it's gone down to 22, 23%.
23, 24, yeah.
Something like that, right? So it's a drop, and 8%, 9% in a country like ours is huge. These women are not going back into the workforce, and there are many reasons for it. But now if you look at a woman who takes a loan for a sewing machine, and there are many associated costs with that, the 100 rupees that you take a loan for and you have to give back 20 rupees a day, I think, to Rajat, to your point, even if she makes a profit, there are many different things that are going against her. Even if she's able to make a profit, what is going against her? A social norm. If she's earning more than her husband, and we've seen this across more than 30 to 40 randomized evaluations that we've done, 35 to be precise, I should be more precise in my number of evaluations. 35 randomized evaluations we've done, and we've seen, and this is across many countries, we've done it in Latin America, Africa, and in South Asia. We've seen that these women, if they're earning more than their husband and they're married, they are more likely to divert the profits to the businesses of their husbands or a different family member. We've also seen that if in Mali or Kenya, I forget, I have to think about which one of the two countries, but we found that they were more likely to be recipients of domestic violence if they were earning more than their husbands. So while we are saying this is great and it's making women entrepreneurs or they're making women earn, but there are, I think the root cause is we need to also look at the social norms, and we need, and whatever, I don't disagree, I'm not against microfinance credit models, but they need to take women into account. They need to have more of a woman-focused model rather than just, and nothing, cars are not made for women. I drive all the time. They're not made for women.
Shobni, just to let you know that more than half the beneficiaries of microfinance in India are women at the end of the day.
I don't disagree.
It's an official statistics.
I don't disagree, but there are two sides of the same coin. And what is it? What do you have you
I have
seen
only
what
one
is happening
coin,
in the
and I
lives
think,
of the women?
Shobni, I have only one coin that says, whatever I do, whatever the company does or other people do, do they make life better for even one person? You may not think one person is important, but I think even life of every person is important. And if you made life of one person good, I think you've done a decent job with yourself. Surely, a lot more need to be done. Social imperils and all those issues are there. But at the end of the day, economic solutions can only solve economic problems mostly. Politics, family can solve social problems.
So let me just come in on this to just weave also Rajat and Smita into this. You see, what we're really looking at here, and what Ajay in a micro way and Shobani in a more macro way are looking at, is that, right, at the end of the day, we have to look at what are the policies we're looking at and where does the evidence take us for large-scale impact, right, on it. And so there are examples all over the place, right, on it. And Shobani, you've mentioned some examples. Smita has mentioned some examples. There are the examples of hand in hand, and over 8 lakh people in South India and Coimbatore and self-help groups. There are lots of examples of things. We're a 1.4 billion person country,
Yes.
right, on it. And to have a female labor force participation rate under 25% in 2023,
under 20%, yes.
is meaning
It's a
that
shame.
you've got a large part of the 50% women in this country approximately who are not part of the economic structure, right, on it. Now, that's one big macro number, right? And I'm just going to bring in some other big macro numbers to, and then look at how do we deal with these outcomes, right? Access to technology, as we say, we are in a knowledge and a post-knowledge economy, right? How many people in the country have access to the knowledge to make use of the knowledge economy that we are supposed to be part of, right, on it? How many people have access? 98% of the country has a primary school within 2 kilometers of their hamlet, right? That's great. So you've got a pakka primary school, right? But you don't have teachers in many of those primary schools, right? If you look at the ASA reports year after year, you are getting declining outcomes from even those primary schools. Right? So now, when you've got structural things where you've got a knowledge-based economy, you've got a gender bias in the economy, you've got participation in the economy from a very small segment of the economy. And this growth, even the 8%, 9% growth, was led by a very small segment of the economy. Right? So if I can just move the debate and the discussion into looking at where does the evidence support large-scale interventions so that it's not micro segments of the population that are actually coming out of this cycle, but how can we make more and more people come out of this cycle?
Poverty.
So
Yeah.
if I could get you all to
Sure.
weigh in on
Can
that.
I, can I
Rajat,
respond?
then you, Smita.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I really want to, I'll respond to your question, but I really want to say that, where we'll just have to agree to disagree. But where we are coming from is different perspectives, of course, right? So I'm coming from a very macro perspective, and Ajay is coming from a micro perspective, and Shobhani is coming from a macro perspective. But let me sort of put this in perspective so that, I don't appear to be sort of disagreeing too vehemently. I mean, this is absolutely right, but as Shobhani said, the question is scaling, and the question is the quality. So a lot of people do sell on the roadside, but I haven't done enough surveys, but I've done very large number, but enough surveys to be able to gauge that, as I was saying, that people do things because they are forced to do it. So you might be selling pakoras, or you might be selling golgappas, or you might be, hawking. You might, why would you want to go to Azadpur Mandi at 5 o'clock in the morning and then come to a colony in Delhi and sell at a certain profit? Is perhaps you don't have a stable job, a quality job, and perhaps in India, a government job, right? There's an obsession with government jobs, and I'll try and weave that into the story. But, so one swallow is definitely not going to make the summer. And so the evidence is that, yes, microfinance helped in small numbers, but when you look at microfinance, on average, the reason why Maligram Committee was created was because of SKS, right? And if you remember SKS and the kinds of usurious interest rates that were, now you would say that, Google's making profit, Amazon's making profit, and they are making profit, there is concentration in the market, they're exploiting the market power, so be it. There's nobody else to come in, so be it. But governments across the world are coming in to address this market failure, right, at a macro level. So concentration of power and abuse of markets is something that governments across the world are looking at. Even countries like the United States of America, which is, in a sense, the epitome of free market and laissez-faire, even the United States today, through a lady called Lina Khan, is looking to control big companies in the IT space. Because Lina Khan has now become the chairperson of the Federal Trade Commission, and is looking at these as concentration of economic power and market power and its abuse a little more seriously than it was in the past. Europe has always been more intrusive, and India has had a sort of middling path towards that. So I think the anecdote versus scale is a sort of debate that is worth having. Of course, the entrepreneurs are better off. Maybe even the hawker is better off. But to take to the next question, how do we address our structural problems in India? And that, if one had an answer to that. So I've done some work on this, Shashank, when I was in ICRIER in the Habitat Center, and we used to have all those discussions in this very room. So I think one of the big failures of India's sort of structural transformation, if you will, is that the fact that we moved away from agriculture and not enough into manufacturing and into services. That sort of it didn't conform to custom. And the benefits that manufacturing could provide in terms of labor-intensive manufacturing, that didn't happen. So I think the diagnosis of the problem is clear, that India, and what Ajay was talking about, the social mores and women in the labor force, but manufacturing is what led to the takeoff of all the East Asian countries. And within manufacturing, it was women in manufacturing, toys, shoes, textiles, garments, labor-intensive industry. And do you know that India's toy industry is more capital-intensive than China's toys industry? India's textile industry is more capital-intensive than China's textile industry. And China is supposed to be more labor abundant than we are, at least until last year. So why did capitalists, so why did entrepreneurs not employ labor? And that's a big story of India's research in the labor market, whether it was the labor laws or whether it was the inspector Raj, it was the license Raj, whatever. I mean, there are so many. I mean, this is one of the most researched topics in India, and entrepreneurs got scared to actually invest in labor-intensive industries because they were actually fearful of what policy or what implementation of policy would do to their businesses. And environment clearances, labor clearance, and so on. Doing business, like the government of India is today saying, we need to reduce our rank in the doing business, so move up top 50. So I think one of the diagnoses, and as I said, Shashank, the solutions are so many, but we have, unlike China immediately before us, and Korea and Japan and so on, all of them used labor-intensive manufacturing for their takeoff. And we haven't been able to do that. Our manufacturing has been capital. So where are these women going to find jobs? Where are the men going to find jobs? Where is the demographic dividend? When is it going to be delivered? I think there are piecemeal sort of solutions to this, but there is no scalable solution yet that is available in India. All what Smita said, all that Shobhini is saying, are going to work in isolation. I mean, they're going to work in pockets. What works in Andhra Pradesh, as RCTs will tell you, may not work in Bihar. What works in Gujarat may not work in UP. What works in Kerala may not work in Rajasthan, etc. So you have to be very, very context specific, which is not saying much. Policy has to be context specific. But I think scalability has been a big problem. And my last comment is actually agreeing what Ajay said, that India's financial infrastructure, India's digital infrastructure is perhaps one of the best in the world, and we are probably going to export it to like-minded countries, even to developed countries. I don't know how they will take on to digital public infrastructure that we have created, but I think this is a huge success story for India. We are trying to export it, and different countries will sort of import it and customize it to their own needs. But this is a huge success for India, and mobile banking is something that is called reverse innovation. It was developed in, let's say, in Kenya, perfected in India, and now being used. And they're much less advanced actually in the United States. And my brother who lives in the United States tells me that our digital financial infrastructure is very, very advanced. And nowhere in the world do you deliver groceries at 10 minutes. But of course, that is a double-edged sword. Yeah. I mean, that's a double-edged sword.
I'm going to take it from there, Rajat, into... So I'm going to bring in Smita, and then I'm going to bring you in, Shobhini. Right? In looking at... I don't want us to delve only on employment, right, and labor force participation, because that's only one part or one lens on the issue. So I'm going to bring Smita, you in, and then you, Shobhini, and start looking at, right, what does the evidence say and point us towards what kind of solutions might work, right, on it. And so Smita, over to you first, right, and you can respond to what Rajat said, and then Shobhini, I'm going to bring you in to look at where's the evidence pointing us, right.
Okay, thanks. So few points just from the conversation that's happened so far. Very quickly, I think there's one very important thing that before microfinance institutions, we had the village money lender, who was a very important institution. He was the one who gave out this 1,000, 2,000, 10,000 money lenders. And they were in cities, they were in villages. They played the role of microfinance before it became organized and institutionalized. And vilified as they are, they served a purpose. As with microfinance, who the ultimate beneficiary is up for debate. So we'll just leave it there, but it's not a new concept, and the rates of interest charge are not very different between the two. But really, what is still a challenge on the other side of all these efforts for financial inclusion and getting access to finance or livelihoods at the bottom of the pyramid is that effectively the level of income or livelihood is still at subsistence level for the large population that we are trying to address. They have really not come up to a level of fair wage income, and that is something, we spoke about that I don't have the answer. I mean, is there a systems change intervention that has worked? How do we really raise the tide? All these interventions are, yes, they're keeping them employed. There are livelihoods, but has their level in their community, in their society, in the economy as a whole, risen to a level where they have choices, right? That's ultimately, that's one of the ways to evaluate, and that has not happened. That has not happened. In terms of, so one of the other hats I wear is I sit on corporate boards as an independent director. And many of these are manufacturing. So coming back to, what Rajat was saying, there is a great effort to actually change the proportion of women on the shop floor. But that has to be done very deliberately by policy and practice at the company level. And it's really up to the company on whether they take it on as a mandate or not. So these are automobile, steel, renewable energy companies that have large shop floor manufacturing practices. But there is an effort. It's small. It's not moved the needle yet. But I think if more companies take it on as a mandate, it could happen. But yeah, the numbers in terms of what, the decline that we've seen is...
Yeah, the structural issue is just way too big.
That's
right.
So
Okay, I am going to take it to Shobni
Yeah.
on it, and then I'm going to bring it to the house for a few questions, and then bring it back to the panel so that we can bring that. But Shobni, really, you guys have actually looked at the evidence across countries, right, about, what works, what doesn't, and most importantly, what works or what doesn't in what context, right, on it. Where is the evidence leading us? In what direction are the solutions going to be found?
So, do two different directions. I'll talk about that in a minute, but I think I just wanted to, weave one earlier point I was thinking about when Rajat was speaking and Smita just spoke is Bangladesh.
Yeah.
Bangladesh has done a great job across many of the fronts that we're talking about, and they've made it, and simply because they have made safer spaces for women to work. To come to work. So I think there's something we can learn from there. That's as an aside. In terms of where the evidence is pointing, I think that let's look at both, and I'll come to the lender and the borrower, because ultimately what is financial inclusion? Financial inclusion is a contract between a lender and the borrower. So when you look at the lender's perspective, and it's a trust deficit market, which is why we have all of these, many different constraints and restrictions and policies and all of that to be able to exist in whatever we call a free market economy. So along with the social protection, which needs to, is very much needed. So if you look at the lenders from lender's perspective, and I'm also quite sympathetic to that, is that when we've looked at a bunch of different evaluations, and now I'm not going to say what's scalable, what's not, to your point, Rajat, but we've seen that and this is again it is local, but and it could be context dependent, but we've seen that if you just give a loan to all and sundry, that is not likely to have that much of an entrepreneurial effect, because it ultimately depends on that individual also. So having said that Gulgappa wala or a puchka wala that Ajay met probably is entrepreneurial. And how did we look at that? So our researchers did a bunch of different experiments. They looked at, one intervention arm was looking at giving loans to all and sundry, whoever randomly assigning loans. The other was assigning loans to people who identified themselves as entrepreneurs, and they were more likely to go in for a loan rather than a grant. And then the third was actually community targeting. So the community got together and said, amongst my peers, these are the folks who are more likely to be able to, do better with that money, have better businesses, turn around profit. And we found that the community targeting was probably the best, as well as the self-targeting. So that the higher returns were higher. I think between 8% to 25% is the rate of return that we saw between the self-targeting and the community targeting. And we found that 3x higher returns 5 years, 10 years later. So I think there's something to be said about what you can do with these models, and how you can even create those necessary lending requirements. Now, I'll come to the borrower's perspective. Now, the borrower's perspective actually is very close to all of our hearts, I think, is how we are looking at it right now, because we don't want that person to go into a poverty trap because of the vicious cycle of this, not being able to make profit and then, not being able to reinvest in their businesses, gender and other social factors included. So what really we need is we need more flexible contract designs between the lender and the borrower. We need more flexibility, and this is where the evidence is pointing, is to say one size does not fit all. It's not a cookie cutter solution. We would like to think it is, but it is not. You cannot have one HDFC bank or one Bandhan bank lending with one model to everybody. You need to have it needs to fit the borrower's needs. We are still an agrarian economy. So we have irregular cash flows. We have different cycles. So you want to be able to be more generous at the beginning of a cropping cycle. You want to be able to. I'm going back to sewing machine. You're moving from sewing by hand to sewing, taking a loan from a machine, taking a loan for a machine. But then you have to also learn how to use that machine. You need that gestation period to be able to use that machine. So you don't have to pay back in the first month. You give them the 3 months. Or we've seen actually 2 months. We've seen a 2 month, over a 12-month period, we've seen a flexibility of giving relaxation by a 2 month this thing, and then they're able to pay back better, they're able to also make profit on the business, expand their businesses. And I'm not talking in general terms. Everything that I'm saying is backed by evidence. I think one last thing I'll talk about is where the evidence is pointing is just more innovative credit process products based on the insights and the behavior insights we're seeing on the borrowers. So if they have more of a risk capital, stocks, can they go for stocks? Vis-a-vis giving them a little bit more of a cushion in terms of the social protection that these instruments give. Last point I'll make is, I'm coming back to women, is the fact that, and if you're saying that the economy is going to, go on the backbone of women, entering the labor markets or becoming entrepreneurs, we need better designs so that so female bank accounts in India has worked, right? But now we are digging deeper to see it might have worked to be able to have women having more access over their own money, but what kind of decisions are they making with that? What are the knock-on effects, downstream impacts to their families, to their households? You're making the kinds of credits that the credit products that you give to women or even even individuals, is that you need to make it harder for them to be able to have conditions in terms of how you spend it. But what is transformative, and I will now completely refute everything I have said so far, is just giving cash. Mm-hmm. Why give a loan? Just give cash. We have seen, and there's enough evidence that unconditional cash transfers are transformative in pulling people out of poverty. They do not. There's this whole group of detractors from this evidence who say that they will drink it away. They don't drink it away. The poor make very wise decisions. Second point I will make, and I know this is not macrofinance, but second point I'll make is that we're working on a very large evaluation. Actually, we've done the evaluation, we've got the evidence, we are now scaling it up instead of Bihar, is the BRAC model of giving an asset, BRAC, B-R-E-C, in Bangladesh.
It's a Bangladesh model.
It's a Bangladesh model of an asset. You give an asset. Now I'm moving away from microfinance to say that everything doesn't have to be loan-based. So the Rural Livelihood Mission in India, they have a loan-based system. They give a loan, and the asset is based on the loan. You have to, you don't give a free asset. But we've evaluated this BRAC model in India, where the ultra-poor women-headed households are given an asset, and they're given 2,000 rupees per month as hand-holding to be able to use that asset, and financial literacy. So financial literacy is very important. I think you brought it up as well somewhere briefly. So financial literacy to these semi-literate or illiterate women. These are women who cannot put in 10 rupees into a self-help group, so they will never make they'll never be able to put money into any microfinance institution. They won't even touch them. MFIs will not touch these women. You give them an asset, you give them hand-holding up to an 18-month period. More than 85-90% of these women have graduated out of extreme poverty into a social security net, and they're able to put the money into self-help groups in the future. So that's, I would say, the evidence is pointing in many directions. There is hope, but there has to be a lot more nuanced models and flexible models. But I somehow personally don't think that MFIs they're not incentive compatible to do that.
Yeah.
Stop there.
Okay, I'm going to take it to the house first, and then we will come back. Can we have a mic? The mics are just coming to you, some, right? And so we'll have the gentleman here, then the gentleman at the back, and we'll take another couple of questions after that. Yeah. The gentleman in the striped shirt here.
नमस्कार, मेरा नाम सुशील द्विवेदी है।
नमस्कार।
मैं बहुत बहुत धन्यवाद, आपने ये प्रोग्राम कंडक्ट कर रहे हैं। दिस इज़ अ वेरी theoretical and it's very good. My question to is with Mr. Ajay जी, जो 40 लाख करोड़ बैंकों में पड़ा हुआ है और वो इन्फ्लेशन को बीट कर नहीं कर पाएगा, तो we will all go poorer and poorer. How the banks can do in make the use of this money, or they will compel to make use of this money in equities, in mutual funds, on behalf of the clients whose money is with them? Because the literacy is not that kind in this country of financial literacy. Without that, we cannot think of in financial inclusion to all. How the banks cannot be put in such a manner that they use this money in the equity and mutual funds?
देखिए सुशील, थैंक यू फॉर द क्वेश्चन। देखिए बैंक तो आपका जो पैसा लेती है वो आरबीआई के रेगुलेशन पे ही यूज़ कर सकती है, और वो है कि अपनी आपके स्टैट्यूटरी रिजर्व डालेगी और लोन देगी। और इसीलिए इंडिया की बैंक्स वर्ल्ड की सबसे प्रॉफिटेबल बैंक्स हैं। इंडिया की बैंक्स यही बिकॉज रीज़न है कि उनके पास में इतना सस्ता पैसा है, कासा जिसे कहते हैं, करंट अकाउंट है सेविंग अकाउंट का। ऐसा कॉन्सेप्ट दुनिया में इंटरेस्ट रेट कम है इसलिए कहीं नहीं है। इसीलिए इंडिया की बैंक्स जो हैं सबसे प्रॉफिटेबल बैंक्स हैं, बिकॉज आपसे पैसा लेती हैं 3 से 4% पे। कुछ नहीं करना उनको, सिर्फ गवर्नमेंट का ट्रेजरी बिल खरीदना है, वो है 9% का, और अगर लोन देना है इंडस्ट्री को तो 10 से 11% है। ये उनका मार्जिन है। उनके पास कोई मैंडेट नहीं है कि आपका पैसा लेके म्यूचुअल फंड या किसी इक्विटी में इन्वेस्ट करें। इनफैक्ट आरबीआई ने बैन कर रखा है बैंक्स को कि बैंक्स इक्विटी में एक्सपोजर नहीं ले सकती हैं। पहले होता था, अब नहीं है। अब उनको सिर्फ लोन दे सकती हैं, तो उसमें बैंक ये काम नहीं कर सकती हैं। थोड़ा फ़र्क पड़ा है लास्ट पिछले 3-4 महीने में, थोड़ा सा लोग जागे हैं, थोड़ा कम हो रहा है कासा। बट आज की तारीख में भी सबसे बड़ा फाइनेंशियल इंक्लूजन का जो नेगेटिव है हमारे यहाँ पे, हर एक को बोला था बैंक में एफडी कर दो, बैंक में पैसा रख लो। उसका नेगेटिव इफेक्ट तो आपने देखा इन्फ्लेशन के बाद में। अगर वो हम ठीक कर सकें तो आई थिंक लाखों करोड़ों लोग का जो वेल्थ है 5 से 10 साल 15 साल में वो दुगने से तिगना हो जाएगा, जो आज वो इन्फ्लेशन भी नहीं घटा पा रहे हैं। बट ये काम बैंक नहीं कर सकता है। बैंक अपना प्रॉफिट बनाता है, कमर्शियल एंटरप्राइज है, और इसीलिए आपने देखा होगा बैंकिंग स्टॉक्स कितने बढ़िया करते हैं।
Sir, no follow-up, please, sir. Sir, Mr. Nidhi, there are other questions, please. No follow-ups. Can I have the gentleman at the back, please?
If I'm not wrong, Andhra Pradesh has banned this microfinance. So they have their own model of self-help groups. So can it provide as a natural experiment to study Andhra Pradesh with its neighbors, Tamil Nadu, Orissa? That is one question. Are there any studies? That is one question I want to know. And the other specific question to Ajay Srivastava ji, I would like to know if there is any data out of how many people Golgappa walas, out of 100 people, how many are getting more than 200 out of investment of 1,000 rupees? That rosy picture you have given. So out of 100 people, how many are meeting this criteria?
Yeah.
If you have any data on that.
Yeah. Ajay, I'll take the other question first, and then we can look at that. Andhra Pradesh, read interesting example. It's where everything went belly up as well in microfinance. Read on it, and of course they came down hard. You're absolutely right, sir. Read. Is there any data comparing Andhra Pradesh with other southern states? There is, but would you like to go?
I'm not privy to that. I mean, it'll be very difficult to design an RCT
Because it's post facto.
It's a natural experiment.
Yeah,
It's a natural
it's a natural
You have to
experiment.
take like a difference in difference of border.
Yeah.
Right, right. It'll be
There's some work which has been done in self-help groups with, hand in hand did some work, right, on it, beginning with Tamil Nadu and then moving into the border areas and things. But I don't know what the evidence, I haven't seen the evidence though, right, coming from there.
Right, because
Yeah.
I just wanted to sort of point out the fact that why did as somebody said very rightly, as I think Smita, the reason why microfinance sort of mushroomed in India at that time was because the money lenders and the banks, right, the cooperative banks or the rural banks that were set up to provide these loans were actually not providing the loans because they were riddled with bureaucracy and they were unable to make those loans. And the requirements of the borrower were very high, the documentation requirements, the asset requirements, and these people didn't have assets. And then you had the money lender who was charging very high rates. Of course, the money lender, as Smita was also saying, provided a service to the borrowers, and it could be services of consulting services, also finding brides and grooms, etc. So those kinds of services were also provided, because a lot of people who've studied the money lender have studied not only the interest rate but also studied the social impacts on that. So in this space, there was, as I was saying, there's market failure, and then the microfinance institutions emerged. So what I'm saying is that in case there is a space that is open in Andhra Pradesh, I'm sure there will be some market-based instruments that will emerge there. I'm not sure, but they will emerge to plug this gap. I don't know who will emerge, but something will emerge. Right?
So Andhra Pradesh has moved to an entirely DBT model now.
Yeah.
It's completely DBT based, direct benefit transfers, and they have like 25 schemes where they are giving they're giving out now. At some point, I think they will have to reevaluate how well that is also working right now.
Yeah.
But there is some evidence why I'll catch you offline to talk about that.
Ajay, would you like to answer that about the Golgappa Wala?
See, I tell you one thing, that today, I know you must have read the RBI increased the capital requirement for lending, small lending. But I can tell you, in the microfinance space, roughly the growth in the last 5 years of the loan portfolio has been a CAGR of above 30% growth in loan portfolios, with a net NPA of less than 3%. That's a kind of default rate. Number 3 is, people who have been taking this credit continue to take credit and expand business at this point of time. So we don't see a drop off in it, but on a country on a whole, 30% growth year on year is already taking place in people borrowing against it without the bad debts going up as was anticipated earlier, or people consuming the money. So you can imagine what's happening around the country, and if you go to any of the online websites, you will see names of companies and brands we don't really never know of. And if you go back to them, they are people who are literally individuals today who are doing sales of 30 lakh, 40 lakhs on some of these websites, purely because they're able to get finance from these institutions on a pure digital basis. कोई application नहीं, कहीं जाना नहीं, घर में credit मिलेगा, घर से payment होगा, and there's a story. So it's a great success story, and I think it is still just started, and it is going to go much deeper. On the other hand, you must have read people running to mutual funds from tier 2, tier 3, tier 4 cities. That is on the other level of people who are surplus, who are coming to the equity market. So I think, India is large. We can only grow as much as the economy grows. At the end of the day, if economy doesn't grow 10, 20% or 10% plus, people cannot grow much beyond that. But within that perspective, there's lots of money going into the right people for productive purposes who have no other way to go. So it's a great business. Every bank is buying microfinance institutions. Companies are doing well, very profitable. All the greatest investors in the world have invested in India's microfinance and financial institutions. What greater testimony can there be? You can pick up Blackstone, you can pick up Warburg, you can pick up anybody, Goldman Sachs, Canadian Pension Fund. They all are investing in Indian financial institutions, also called fintechs now because they're technology based. So I think can't give you the data exactly, 1 million, 2 million, but the growth is in order of 30% plus.
Okay, so maybe 2 more questions from the floor. Yes. Yeah. And after that, the gentleman.
Yeah, I have a question for Shobini. So, earlier this year, I met up with Priya Naik from Samhita. and we were discussing something called returnable grants. And I think what you were talking of is the concept of a returnable grant. So I was curious to know, Shobini, is this actually in practice in India? What's the data like? What's the loss data like? So after you look at all of that, does this seem to be a valid competitor to, say, a microfinance in the Indian context? And can the social sector look at this as an instrument for economic growth?
So to answer that question for you, I will have to do an RCT.
Yeah.
But on a more
Top
serious
of the
note,
mind.
so I would say, I mean, I should let Rajat answer that. But I think if I remember correctly, when Priya was creating these returnable grants, it was during COVID, and or just before COVID. So
No,
this
I
is,
spoke to her in February this
no,
year.
but this concept has existed for quite some time now. So we actually worked with them to inform some of their them setting up some of these grants as well. So they had two different models. They had a model returnable grants, a lot of them for the migrant workers, and the migrant workers were affected because of COVID, and that is one piece where they were thinking about this, and then the other piece they were looking at was healthcare workers, frontline sanitation frontline workers. So the returnable grant is I completely agree with you, it's a very interesting concept. I will not be able to say whether we think it has promise. I can't tell you whether it works because we don't have any causal evidence, so I will only speak for causal evidence. But it's something that I think it's also attracting the attention of a lot of these bonds, these impact bond evaluators, exactly. So I think I would say we will see some emerging evidence from there soon enough, but I'm not aware of any causal evidence at the moment.
Okay.
Thanks.
Question there, and then I'll get you in. Yeah.
Thank you, sir. So my name is Nitin. So my question is, we are praising a DPI, but the China is investing like $200 billion, and India is only $10 billion. So there is a huge gap, and I think like private player is not very much interested to invest in a DPI. So this is the data, and like we are talking about women, like 41% of Indian women using internet, while 61% Indian men are using internet. And this is one thing. This is my question: why the private player is not interested, and why this much huge gap is there in between, like $10 billion and $200 billion? And my second question is like you're talking about the women labor force participation. So data of India is like 29.4% Indian women, while Saudi Arabia is ahead of us and it is 33%. So why this? Like we are not counting the endowment there, or some problem in the policy, or some data manipulation. And one more thing, like there is Muhammad Yunus ma'am talk about that, banking on value, like successful social experiment in the Bangladesh. And there is two loan provider like Prodigy and Empower Financing, and they are providing loan without collateral, without cosigner. And like why do not have that type of company in India? Because in India, if you want to get the education loan 7.5 lakh, you have to put the collateral. We do not have the pattern like Prodigy Finance and Empower Financing. Why this is? So this is my question. I want to.
Yeah, I mean, I'm just going to comment on one part of your question and then hand it over to the panel. The issue in India is not so much the absolute female labor force participation rate, but the fact that it's been declining. Right on it, that's the bigger concern than just the absolute number, because the absolute number can be whatever. Right on it is the fact that in a time when it should have been increasing, it is declining. Right, and I think that's really the concerning issue. Right, but who'd like to take some aspects of that question? Right on it, Rajat. Yep.
Sure. So I think comparisons with China will always leave us sort of not looking pretty. But the whole idea of DPI is digital public infrastructure. Now, the question is, who's going to provide that? I agree with you, the private sector can provide digital public infrastructure, and the government will then, provide the terms and conditions, like PPPs, right? The government will provide the terms and conditions to create this digital public infrastructure. And I think the reason, both Ajay and I are saying that this is really a good thing for India is because, so for example, the mobile phone, when it first came in, there was a natural experiment that was done by a Harvard University professor and he knew that there was already mobile phones in Delhi and Bombay. He went to Kerala. And he said, okay, there's going to be mobile phones coming. This is 1996. Mobile phone. Robert Jensen is his name. You can sort of Google and there's a very nice paper in what is called the Quarterly Journal of Economics. To cut a long story short, he did that natural experiment. He went there, did a survey of fishermen, did a survey of the price at which it was sold. He did a survey at the price at which consumers bought the fish, etc., sellers and buyers. And then when the mobile phone came in, he replicated the survey, and he found, lo and behold, that there was huge creation of value. And the reason there was a huge creation of value is because information which was scarce in the pre-mobile days now became available both to the consumers and to the sellers, where the markets were, where the consumers are, etc. And this was able to be leveraged. And so in a nutshell, what the DPI or what the mobile phone is doing is making markets more efficient. I mean, it's bringing buyers and sellers together. Assets that were not used can be put in use, because there is information now. So that's the positive side of DPI. And now, why is the government wanting to fund DPI? There are various reasons. UPI is interoperability. Everybody can be on the same platform. There is no difference in platforms. Interoperability or switching costs then become very low. Everybody doesn't have to have the same platform. And then UPI exists, and which can talk across platforms. There is something that is coming up in India now, which is called the ONDC, which is trying to alleviate or address the market power that is possessed by Google or Amazon. And ONDC will be, this is online digital commerce. And if it becomes successful, because network effects are something that drives digital market. Why is Amazon so popular? Because you use it, I use it. Think of Harry Potter. When Harry Potter came, every little kid wanted to buy Harry Potter. Why? Because there were network effects. A kid goes to school and says, have you read Harry Potter? No. I must read Harry Potter. Everybody started reading Harry Potter, and it became a rage. Right? I'm giving you an example. So digital markets work similarly, network effects. You're using Amazon, I'll use Amazon, everybody else, you use for payments, you use purchase, you use everything. And it becomes the rage, it becomes the dominant player. That's the good part. And as Ajay was saying, people can sell on it, Amazon is giving you credit, and it will create entrepreneurs out of. The problem, I think, for India is, whether it's DPI or whether it's microfinance, is that it's the scale of the problem. And I think to be able to address, because we're talking about financial inclusion, each one of these will be an instrument for financial inclusion in part. It will never be what China could do. China Bank, which is bigger than all banks in India put together. You'll never have that kind of a solution for India. So there will be solutions everywhere, and we have to sort of see which is the best through our cities or through policy and through evidence, and then try and scale those up. One point, Shashank. The point that Shobni made about community lending is very attractive. In fact, I didn't know about this RCT or this experiment, but there is a book which came to my mind while she was speaking, which is written by Nananden and our former governor of the Reserve Bank, Raghuram Rajan. And he's written various books on capitalism and saving capitalism from the capitalists. And there is a book called The Third Pillar. Third Pillar, yes, which is on communities. So when capitalism can be a success, according to him, when communities get involved. And I think that's what came to my mind when Shobani was talking about this community-based experiments and how they are better. I mean, it's like the microfinance story, right? In a sense that you have a group, so you have peer pressure to return the loan. So you have peers that are applying pressure. You don't have collateral, but you have peer pressure. You won't get your next loan, or the lady next to you will not get the loan unless this lady has returned the loan. So there's some sort of a peer pressure or community involvement in the project. So I think that's something worth thinking about.
Okay, I'm going to start winding some of these thoughts together, and I'm going to leave the last words in a way by which the women get the last words. Right on it, Susmita, you'll have to wait for a bit. But there's some themes that have emerged, and the themes are sometimes paradoxical in their approach. That do you, on one level, look at direct benefit transfer? Do you look at universal basic income? Right? how are those two compatible in the same universe, right, on it? Do you look at community-based lending and the peer effect, or do you talk about targeting the entrepreneurial spirit and lending to that entrepreneurial spirit? Some of these are contradictory. Some of these are paradoxical. Can they coexist in the same ecosystem? Can they actually work together? And at some stage, you have to scale up beyond, okay, let's just look at the evidence, let's look at experimenting, and look at what do we put our weight behind, right, on it? Now, or is there room in this ecosystem to have a number of these models working together, right, on it? So I'm trying to just weave this together and coming up with that, is there a multiplicity of solutions that we need to look at, right? Or should we just be weighing behind, let's get behind universal basic income as some countries are trying to do, or let's get behind just pure communities as some parts of the country have worked with self-help groups and done very effectively. So I'm going to begin with you, Ajay, right? Take it over to Rajat, right? And bring the ladies in to wind this up then, right? Ajay, over to you.
No, I think what you said is very correct. I don't think there is one model going to fit everybody. You're going to try different things at different times as well. But the most important thing, I think, to me is psychologically people need to feel that they can be and are empowered to improve their lifetime, in their own lifetime. I think it's more a game of psychology than of money, than of finance. You got to believe in yourself that, listen, I need to improve my lot and I can do it. And I think if you can do that yourself, there is enough available in the system even today, which allows you to take care of yourself, improve your wealth, improve your family situation, so on. So to me, Shashank, the honest answer is, we have got enough tools available in this country. Enough tools, enough government intervention, private interventions. It's just each individual needs to focus and says, I can do better, and if I can do better, I need to work towards it. And I think that's the answer to me. People need to just feel comfortable that they can do it themselves. Enough things are available for them.
Rajat.
Yes, I agree. I mean, it has to be a multiplicity of instruments, and also, you know, the federal structure of India is such that the center will have only a limited role to play by creating policy. It will also have to come down at the state level. But I want to sort of end whatever I've said, what I had to say, but I wanted to end borrowing something that Smita, you know, in passing mentioned, but it has a deeper, I think, implication for a country like India, which is the sort of, is it the institutions that will deliver, or whether it is individuals that will deliver? And I think she had made a reference to, there was one individual in one sort of company or in one of her sort of entrepreneurs that did really well, etc. And so often in India we've seen that you look at solid waste management, or you look at one municipal commissioner in one particular city, and Indore, you know, for example, the cleanest city. Why did that happen? Why cannot that happen elsewhere? And the answer apparently lay in the fact that you had a very committed individual who was there. Will the institution work as well after he or she leaves? And in India, you know, I think we have placed importance on institutions, but what has delivered are individuals, more often than not. I mean, I'm being sort of, permit me to be a little general, but it is the individuals much more than the institutions that have delivered. And for a country, I mean, the last person to replicate evidence that has been, you know, created by scholars based in the West, etc. But there is a book by Simon Johnson and Darren Acemoglu called Why Nations Fail, in which there is clear evidence to suggest that institutions, robust institutions in countries, in federal structures, they deliver more often than not. If they are left to the vagaries of an individual, then often you will see, you know, up and down sort of development in that state or in that country. So I think we have to strengthen our institution, but that's a, you know, general statement, very general statement, but I'm sort of parking the thought with you that institutions in India have delivered when the individuals have been visionary. And when you haven't had those visionary individuals, institutions have tended to just become lackadaisical. And I think it's important to get more women in charge of individual. I haven't spoken about women, but more women in the labor force, more women in companies, more women as directors. As Shobhini was saying, unconditional transfers to women will probably, so I mean, we haven't spoken of gender, but I think we have too less participation of women in companies, in the labor force, in companies, in decision-making positions. They hit this glass ceiling, and we have to somehow we have to change that. Yeah.
Smitha, you've been waiting for a while, right, on it. So over to you. Yeah.
Thank you. I have to say I've really enjoyed this conversation. So to answer your question, absolutely multiplicity of tools, solutions, and this will keep evolving because none of these are a permanent answer. So, we've seen this evolution. I've seen it over, let's say, 30 years, and the speed of change is only getting faster. So, and one size does not fit all. So we've seen, when we're talking about community, the self-help group model has been very successful. I mean, the number of self-help groups that have been created and federated up to a very active and successful point is incredible. And that infrastructure is lending itself to many things. It started for financial inclusion, but it's become an ecosystem. And it lends itself to other things. So I think questions generate answers, and it generates further answers and solutions. So equally, I have seen artisan entrepreneurs succeed, individuals. So both the federated self-help groups and individuals. One thing we haven't talked about where that is coming up and could turn out to be an option is the social stock exchange. So coming to Ajay and the power of equities and what that can do, the social stock exchange actually is new. I'm working on a task force to kind of help scale that up. There are two tracks. I mean, one is very much equities for social enterprises. The other is it's more like crowdsourcing grant funding, to just put it simplistically. But if the goal really is that out of every 5 investors who have demat accounts, and the number of demat accounts that are opening every single day in India is another, statistic that's not to be ignored. If we can get 1 out of those 5 to also invest in the social stock exchange, that could be a game changer for the bottom of the pyramid, So that's one thing I just wanted to bring to the table. But really, I think any of these solutions, options, we need to start thinking in terms of from a systems change perspective. And that comes with time and with evidence. And there is a tipping point that if it's adopted by 20% of the population that you're targeting it to, that will bring a systems change in that ecosystem in terms of a solution. So I think that's a really good lens, and that is what my holy grail, that's what I'm looking for. Where can I spend my time and energy? What should I put my weight behind? Would be a systems change solution that helps to change the narrative. Yeah, so that's fine. Thanks.
Shobhini, over to you.
Sure. So I'll just say that there are 3 words that come to my mind, and many different ways. House of cards, circular economy, everything is connected. And the reason I say this is because we are discussing financial inclusion right now, but the solutions don't lie alone in that lending product. I don't know why I keep pointing this way, but a lending product. So for instance, we could think about, if women were, it's a thought exercise, how many women are in leadership positions in microfinance institutions actually creating these products? I think it's negligible.
Very fair.
right? And I'd love to see, how we can, natural experiment, love to see
Yeah.
what are those kinds of products that are coming out from institutions, MFIs run by women,
Yeah.
vis-a-vis not anyway. That's
No, there are many more in
that's a different,
traditional finance
yeah,
institutions.
yeah. It's
Massive
like,
numbers
yeah,
in
fantastic.
traditional.
And
Yeah.
we need another. That's our next.
Next lecture. Yeah.
Yes, exactly.
Any-
And then I think the other thing I'll say, and no conversation can end without talking about climate change.
Yeah.
So, and I'm saying this because when I say everything is connected, it is, we have, the earth is getting hotter, more polluted, where's water scarcity. Solutions are not going to, some solutions will come from better micro lending products for agricultural farmers, for, health insurance, better health insurance products for, to be able to combat with, the health impacts of pollution or what we're seeing in climate change. We talked about youth. We've not talked enough about youth, I feel, in this conversation. The solutions will come from youth across all of these dimensions. It's the urban youth, and the hope lies in the current generation. I have a 10-year-old, sorry, and I feel that our generation, I think we've sort of lost the plot. I think that hopefully they will do something better than us. And then you talked about institutions, Rajat. I completely agree. Champions live within institutions. We need to find those champions. I'll end here. Thank you.
Yeah. And, increasing precarity in different ways, not just climate, various ways, and multiplicity of solutions. It's a complex world out there, right, on it. And I think coming to the end of this edition of Trendspotting, our perspective here is not to come up with pat answers. That's not what Trendspotting is about, right? Trendspotting is to look at the different nuances of an issue, and I hope that as a result of this conversation today, you're going to leave this hall better informed than you were when you walked in, right? And that's the purpose of Trendspotting. So it is up to me now to have the pleasure to thank the panelists, Ajay Srivastav, Smita Mankad, Shobni Mukherjee, Rajat Katuria, and to also thank all of you for having spent your time today with us, and to the Habitat Center for giving us this lovely space. Thank you, good night, and I hope to see you again at another edition of Trendspotting. Thank you.